When John, a decorated veteran, tried to board the plane, an unexpected snag halted his plans. He discovered that he had misplaced his ticket and the airline staff, despite his recent check-in, denied him entry. John was dumbfounded. He had just presented his ticket moments earlier. Fortunately, John had a backup plan. With a single phone call, he could secure his passage. The staff's demeanor shifted dramatically upon learning who John had contacted. But who did John call? How did this call grant him access? And what caused such a reaction from the crew? John had received an invitation to attend a special ceremony in the country where he had once served, honoring veterans like himself. The government had generously provided him with a business-class ticket, acknowledging his sacrifices and contributions. Excited about the upgrade, John double-checked everything on the day of his flight, ensuring he had his passport, plane ticket, and luggage ready before hopping into a taxi to the airport. As one of the first passengers in line for boarding, John expected to quickly settle into his seat. However, it became apparent that this wouldn't be as easy as he had hoped. The boarding agent asked for John's passport, which he readily provided. "Your boarding pass, please," she then requested, leading John to chuckle as he realized he had forgotten to take it out of his bag. Of course, "Just a moment, please, let me find it." But when he checked his bag, the boarding pass wasn't there. He was convinced that that was where he had left it. John smiled kindly at the boarding agent and told her, "I can't seem to find it right now," thinking she would let him board anyway, since he had already needed to scan his boarding pass to check in. But this did not happen. The boarding agent didn't even smile back at John or try to hide her displeasure. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." John was stunned. Was she being serious? "Sir, you're holding up the rest. Either you leave now willingly, or we'll have to call the police," the boarding agent suddenly demanded. "Please, you have to believe me. I have a seat on that plane." John tried to plead with her, but nothing seemed to work. John felt a wave of frustration but kept his composure, clinging to hope. Realizing his continued presence was only escalating the situation, John stepped aside. His movements were slow, weighed down by disbelief and disappointment. As the last of the passengers disappeared down the jetway, a stark realization hit John. He watched, feeling a sense of urgency rising within him. The gate was closing, and with it, his chances of making the flight and the ceremony. With a deep breath, John reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. It was his last hope, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. Making this call could change everything. He knew. With a resolute click, he made his decision. John pressed the phone to his ear, his expression hardened with determination. The line connected, and John spoke with urgency, his voice low and firm. "I need your help," he began, his words rushing out. The response on the other end was inaudible, but John's reaction spoke volumes. John's voice was a low murmur, his conversation barely audible amid the terminal's hum. He spoke with measured words, each sentence carefully crafted. Nearby passengers and staff, having witnessed John's urgent call, began to whisper among themselves. Who could he be talking to? Someone murmured. As John's call drew to a close, his voice grew more earnest. "Please, I need this," he implored, a note of desperation creeping in. "Thank you," he whispered, a mixture of relief and apprehension in his voice. The call ended, leaving John in a state of hopeful anticipation. After ending the call, John's eyes immediately shifted to the large clock hanging above the gate. The minutes were slipping away, each one heightening his anxiety. The boarding agent, with a final glance at John, reached for her walkie-talkie. "Gate closing for Flight 217, she announced, her voice void of emotion. John watched in despair as she relayed the message. The finality of her words struck him like a physical blow. John stood motionless as the plane began to taxi away. He watched disheartened as it moved further and further from the gate, taking with it his last vestiges of hope. Just as the plane began to move, an airport employee hurried towards John and the agent. John's eyes widened in surprise, his heart skipping a beat. The unexpected arrival of the employee paused the finality of the moment. The employee leaned in, whispering something into the agent's ear. The words were inaudible, but their impact was immediate. The agent's rigid demeanor softened, her eyebrows rising in apparent surprise. She turned to John, her previously stern face now wearing a forced smile. "There's been a mix-up," she explained, her tone unexpectedly amiable. "You can board the plane." John's heart leaped at her words. The sudden shift from despair to opportunity was disorienting yet exhilarating. He could hardly believe the turn of events. A moment ago, all had seemed lost, and now unexpectedly, his path was clear. With a nod of gratitude to the employee, John quickly made his way to the boarding gate. John settled into his seat, the only empty one on the plane. Suddenly, the pilot's voice filled the cabin, clear and warm over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest aboard today, veteran John, heading to a distinguished ceremony." John's eyes widened in surprise. The recognition was unexpected, bringing a flush of pride and humility. The pilot's welcome was a balm, soothing the earlier sting of the day's events. At the pilot's warm acknowledgement, a wave of relief washed over John. He smiled, feeling a sense of belonging and appreciation he hadn't felt in hours. As the flight neared its destination, John's anticipation for the ceremony grew. He imagined the gathering, the respect and recognition, the shared stories among fellow veterans. John started to prepare for landing, organizing his belongings and straightening up. He stepped off the plane with dignified poise, a renewed sense of purpose evident in his stride. The challenges of the day had not dampened his spirit, but rather fortified his resolve. Upon arrival at the ceremony location, John was greeted with warm smiles and heartfelt handshakes. The welcome was a stark contrast to the day's earlier events, filling him with a sense of belonging and appreciation. John looked around, taking in the faces of his fellow veterans, feeling a deep connection to each of them. The ceremony of honor had begun. The moment arrived for John to take the stage. With each step towards the podium, his heart swelled with a mix of pride and responsibility. This was his moment to share his story, to represent his fellow servicemen and women. The room hushed in anticipation. John began his speech, his voice steady and clear. He spoke of his time in service, of the bonds formed and the sacrifices made. His words were heartfelt, painting a vivid picture of the life of a soldier. He talked about the challenges, the triumphs, and the unbreakable spirit of those who serve. As John approached the conclusion of his speech, he chose to share a personal anecdote. He recounted how a high-ranking military officer, an old friend, had once come to his aid in a moment of need. This story added a poignant layer of humanity and vulnerability to his speech, highlighting the enduring bonds forged through military service. The audience listened attentively, touched by the demonstration of loyalty and friendship that transcended both time and rank. John concluded his speech, and as the ceremony drew to a close, he led a heartfelt tribute to all veterans. A moment of collective reflection followed, honoring the sacrifices and bravery of those who had served. The ensuing applause was not solely for John, but for every veteran present, a poignant recognition of their shared legacy of service. With the ceremony's end, John experienced a deep sense of fulfillment. He felt that his journey had culminated in a meaningful tribute to a life dedicated to serving others. What are your thoughts on our veteran? Share them in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Thank you.